A video about Britain's Navy hit 1 million views in one day. The comments section wasn't arguing about whether the Royal Navy was declining. They were arguing about whether the video got its facts straight. One commenter wrote that British politicians should be awarded Iron Crosses for defeating the entire British Navy without firing a shot. 4 people liked that. Another commenter asked what about the new frigates being built for the UK and Norway. That question had 4 engagement points of its own. The word misinformation appeared 7 times across the comments, accumulating 15 total engagement. And buried somewhere in the middle, a fact that kept getting repeated: 40 admirals for 63 ships. The engagement rate on that video was 0.018%. 207 comments on 1.1 million views. The silent majority watched without typing anything. The loud minority split into 2 camps. People who believed the decline narrative but were embarrassed by factual errors, and skeptics who caught those errors and used them to dismiss the entire argument. If you've followed Royal Navy decline and wondered what's actually true, this video is for you. The original video made errors. Some of them were sloppy. Some of them deserve to be called out. But the people in those comments who used those errors to dismiss the entire decline narrative, they're catastrophically wrong, and the numbers prove it. The undisputed, officially published, parliamentarily recorded numbers that nobody on either side of that comment war seemed to actually check. The claim that lit the match was this: 40 admirals for 63 ships. The ratio that launched 1,000 arguments. The number that critics called misinformation. The actual figures from official Ministry of Defence sources, parliamentary written questions and fleet lists reveal something more complicated than either side suggested, and ultimately worse for anyone hoping the Royal Navy is fine. On 1 July 2025, the Ministry of Defence confirmed in a formal parliamentary response that the Royal Navy and Royal Marines had 134 flag officers. That's the official number from OF6 to OF10. 134 officers with stars on their shoulders. The response specified this covered ranks from Commodore up to Admiral of the fleet. But that 134 figure requires unpacking. It includes Commodores, who in the United Kingdom are OF6 officers. In the American system, that's equivalent to a 1-star Rear Admiral lower half. But in British usage, Commodores aren't traditionally counted as flag officers in the strictest sense. The term flag officer historically referred to officers whose rank entitled them to fly their own distinguishing flag from a ship's mast. The active serving list, the actual senior naval officers at Rear Admiral rank and above, contains 39 officers. The breakdown from official sources shows 3 admirals at OF9, 10 vice-admirals at OF8, 25 rear admirals at OF7, 1 surgeon rear admiral at OF7. Total, 39 officers of rear admiral rank and above on the active serving list. The viral claim said 40 admirals. The official count says 39 active flag officers at Rear Admiral and above. The original video was off by 1. That's not misinformation. That's a rounding difference that changes nothing about the underlying point. So what about those 63 ships? As of December 2025, the Royal Navy has 63 commissioned ships, according to official fleet lists. That number appears in Wikipedia's list of active Royal Navy ships, which draws from Ministry of Defence publications and the Royal Navy's own website. 63 is technically accurate, but the composition of that 63 tells a different story than the raw number suggests. Of those 63 commissioned vessels, only 15 are major surface combatants. 2 aircraft carriers, HMS Queen Elizabeth and HMS Prince of Wales. 6 Type 45 guided missile destroyers, Daring, Dauntless, Diamond, Dragon, Defender and Duncan. 7 Type 23 frigates, Iron Duke, Richmond, Somerset, Sutherland, Kent, Portland and St Albans. The remaining 48 ships include 10 nuclear-powered submarines, 4 Vanguard-class ballistic missile boats carrying the nuclear deterrent, and 6 Astute-class fleet submarines. There are 8 mine countermeasures vessels, split between the Hunt and Sandown classes. There are 26 patrol vessels, most of them the small Archer-class boats, assigned to University Royal Naval units for training. 2 survey vessels, 1 icebreaker, and HMS Victory, a wooden first-rate ship of the line, commissioned in 1778, that sits in permanent dry dock at Portsmouth as a museum piece, and the ceremonial flagship of the First Sea Lord. HMS Victory is technically a commissioned warship. She's also been sitting in the same spot since 1922 and hasn't sailed under her own power since before the American Civil War. But she's in the 63, so the ratio the viral video implied, 1 admiral for every ship and then some, actually understates the problem when you look at what matters operationally. If you compare 39 active flag officers at Rear Admiral and above to 63 total vessels, including training patrol boats, survey ships, and an 18th century museum, you get roughly 0.6 admirals per ship. Seems reasonable. But if you compare those 39 flag officers to the 15 major surface combatants that can actually project power, the carriers, destroyers and frigates, you get 2.6 flag officers for every major warship. And if you include the attack submarines that hunt Russian boats in the Norwegian Sea, adding 6 more platforms to get 21 combat-capable vessels, you still have nearly 2 flag officers for every platform that can fight. The UK Defence Journal published a breakdown that put it more bluntly. 3 flag officers for every warship, 1 brigadier or above for every 340 soldiers, and nearly as many air officers as fast jets. A parliamentary question dated 29th of October 2025 confirmed the service breakdown. 135 flag officers in the Royal Navy and Royal Marines, 211 general officers in the Army. The slight discrepancy between 134 and 135 reflects different counting dates. The viral video's specific number was slightly wrong, but its underlying point, that the administrative overhead of the Royal Navy has grown wildly disproportionate to the fleet it administers, isn't only correct, it's provably worse than the original claim suggested. The critics who called this misinformation caught a trivial error. They missed the truth hiding behind it. The original video deserved criticism on one count, and the record should reflect that concession. Aircraft carriers need maintenance. All of them. Every Navy's carriers spend significant time in refit. The American Nimitz-class carriers undergo refueling and complex overhauls at the midpoint of their 50-plus-year lifespans. Massive projects that take 3 to 4 years on paper and sometimes stretch to 5 or 6. One Nimitz-class carrier started RCOH in 2021, with an original completion date of August 2025. As of the research period, it was expected to take over 5 years total. The French carrier Charles de Gaulle entered dry dock for her midlife refit in February 2017, floated out in May 2018 and reached her operational berth at the end of July 2018. Approximately 18 months for a comprehensive midlife upgrade. She'd also previously completed a 6-month intermediate refit program. US Navy carrier strike group assets undergo maintenance and training for a combined 14 months under the Optimized Fleet Response Plan, leaving about 22 months of deployment availability in each cycle. CNO maintenance periods for surface ships occur every 2 to 3 years. The Queen Elizabeth-class carriers were designed with planned maintenance periods built into their operational cycles from the beginning. HMS Queen Elizabeth completed her first phase of planned maintenance in approximately 9 months, finishing around July 2024. This is standard carrier operations. This is how modern carriers work everywhere. So if someone told you both British carriers being down for maintenance simultaneously proves the Navy is collapsing, that person was overstating their case. Carriers are maintenance-intensive platforms. Maintenance happens. Maintenance is normal. The original video deserved criticism for treating routine refit cycles as evidence of crisis. But unexpected mechanical failures on both carriers within 18 months of each other fall outside the bounds of normal. The same type of failure occurring twice on sister ships built to identical designs falls outside the bounds of normal. In August 2022, HMS Prince of Wales set sail from Portsmouth Harbour bound for the United States. She was deploying to conduct exercises and port visits across the Atlantic. 1 day later, she broke down. 1 day. The carrier had barely cleared British waters when her propeller shaft failed. The cause was a broken propeller shaft that had been misaligned. The failure caused significant damage to the carrier's propulsion system. HMS Prince of Wales was towed back to port. She would spend months undergoing repairs while the Royal Navy tried to explain how its newest aircraft carrier had lasted less than 48 hours at sea. The ship has faced significant scrutiny for its limited operational history. Commissioned in 2019, she spent more time broken or in repair than deploying operationally. 18 months later, it happened again. This time to her sister ship. In February 2024, HMS Queen Elizabeth was preparing to sail for NATO exercises. The carrier was going through routine pre-sailing checks, the standard procedures that occur before any major warship puts to sea. During those checks, crew discovered a propeller shaft coupling issue. HMS Queen Elizabeth cancelled her deployment. She didn't participate in the NATO exercise she was supposed to join. Instead, she returned to extended maintenance. The setback came 18 months after her sister ship's breakdown. The same type of propulsion failure, the same class of carrier, the same fundamental problem manifesting in both ships Britain spent £6 billion to build. By September 2024, Queen Elizabeth was in the second phase of her maintenance programme, following an initial stage that took 9 months to complete. 2 propeller shaft failures on 2 carriers in under 2 years. That's not a maintenance schedule, That's a design flaw or a construction defect, expressing itself repeatedly across the entire class. The critics were right that treating normal refits as crises was overblown. They were wrong to use that valid criticism to dismiss the genuine mechanical reliability problems that have plagued both Queen Elizabeth-class vessels since they entered service. The original video got the framing wrong. The underlying problem is real and documented and happening. The comments asked a question that deserved a serious answer. What about the new frigates being built for the UK and Norway? The Type 26 frigate programme exists. Construction is advancing on the River Clyde in Scotland. 5 of the 8 planned frigates are currently in build at BAE Systems shipyards at Govan and Scotstoun in Glasgow. HMS Glasgow, the lead ship, is in advanced stages of assembly and fired up her diesel generators for the first time in late 2025. HMS Cardiff is structurally complete and undergoing outfitting. Steel has been cut for HMS Sheffield. Block assembly is underway for HMS Belfast and HMS Birmingham. The programme is also approximately 5 years behind schedule. In August 2015, the Ministry of Defence ordered the first long lead items for Type 26. Manufacturing was expected to begin in 2016. Steel was actually cut on HMS Glasgow in 2017. At that time, government officials claimed the first ship would reach in-service date in the mid-2020s. The original projection from 2015 targeted delivery in 2023. HMS Glasgow is now expected to reach initial operating capability in 2028. All 8 Type 26 ships are scheduled to enter service between 2028 and 2035. Sea trials for Glasgow are expected to begin in 2026, with the ship entering service in 2027. Original target 2023. Current target 2028. That's 5 years of slippage on a programme that will define the Royal Navy's anti-submarine warfare capability for the next 3 decades. Each Type 26 costs approximately £1 billion, according to previous ministerial statements. The commenter who asked about new frigates was right to point out that construction is happening. But the delivery timeline has slipped by half a decade, and the ships the Type 26 is supposed to replace are falling apart faster than anyone planned. The Norway deal complicates matters further. In September 2025, Norway formally ordered 5 Type 26 frigates in what the UK government called its largest warship export at $13.5 billion. Good news for British shipbuilding. Good news for the balance of trade. Complicated news for the Royal Navy's timeline. Norway specified a critical requirement. The first ship must be delivered by 2029. That deadline is tighter than the current UK schedule. Norway needs these ships to replace its ageing Fridtjof Nansen-class frigates. They're not waiting until the mid-2030s. Defence analysts have studied how BAE Systems will meet both commitments. The consensus from publications like Navy Lookout is that one ship, currently designated for the Royal Navy, will likely be allocated to Norway to meet their 2029 deadline. Most probably HMS Belfast, the third ship in the production run, or HMS Birmingham, the fourth. BAE Systems has stated that by ship 5 in the production sequence, construction time will have been halved to 5.5 years per ship. But meeting Norway's deadline means reprioritising which navy gets which hull in which order. The Royal Navy may find itself waiting longer for its own frigates, while a foreign customer takes delivery of vessels originally allocated to British service. The Type 31 programme is even further from operational. 0 Type 31 frigates are currently in service. None. All 5 Inspiration-class frigates remain under construction at Babcock's Rosyth facility on the Firth of Forth, scheduled to enter service in the early 2030s. HMS Venturer is the lead ship. HMS Active was rolled out in February 2026. HMS Bulldog has had steel cut. But none of these vessels will protect anything until the next decade arrives. The Type 31s will eventually add capable, exportable general-purpose frigates to the fleet. The Arrowhead 140 design is being marketed internationally by Babcock, but scheduled delivery in the early 2030s means they won't fill the gap currently opening in the Royal Navy's surface fleet. Meanwhile, the Type 23 frigates they're supposed to replace are reaching the end of their service lives faster than the replacement programme can deliver. The Type 23 frigates were never supposed to last this long. They were designed in the 1980s, built in the late 1980s and early 1990s, and intended to serve until newer designs replaced them. HMS Westminster and HMS Northumberland have both been decommissioned after being judged beyond economic repair. By the end of 2025, Type 23 frigate strength was projected to reduce to just 7 frigates. As of January 2026, the Royal Navy was operating with only 7 frigates and 6 destroyers in total. HMS Richmond is one of the last surviving examples of the mid-programme Type 23 frigates, launched by Swan Hunter on the Tyne in 1993. Her sister ships, Westminster and Northumberland, have both been decommissioned. Richmond received the Power Generation Machinery Upgrade programme, replacing her original diesel generators. By the end of 2025, she had sailed on 2 global deployments since her LifeX refit was completed in 2020. Whether she can soldier on for another 5 years is doubtful. One Type 23 frigate returned to service after a 9-year refit. 9 years to repair and upgrade a single frigate. That's how desperate the maintenance backlog has become. This is what defence analysts call the frigate gap. The old ships are dying, the new ships aren't ready. And there's nothing anyone can do about it in the short term, because you can't build frigates faster than industrial capacity allows. The Royal Navy is now in an unavoidable frigate gap until at least 2028. This will be followed by a 7 to 8 year period where predicting frigate numbers is totally uncertain. Although the first Type 26 and Type 31 will begin arriving in the late 2020s, if the Type 23s can't be kept going through hull and machinery degradation, the theoretical requirement of 13 frigates won't be reached until the mid-2030s. The original video's critics asked about the new frigates being built. Here's the answer they deserved. The frigates exist, but they're 5 years late, and the fleet is hollowing out while everyone waits for them to arrive. Now the problem that makes all of this worse. The problem that turns a manageable shipbuilding delay into an operational crisis. The problem that both sides of the comment war ignored completely. The Royal Navy doesn't have enough sailors. The recruitment failure isn't recent. It isn't a blip caused by the pandemic or a bad marketing campaign. The Royal Navy has failed to hit its recruitment targets every single year since 2011. That's 14 consecutive years of missing the mark. 14 years of building an ever-widening gap between the sailors the Navy needs and the sailors it actually has. In 2023 to 24, only 2,450 recruits joined the Navy, against a target of 4,040. That's a 40% shortfall. more than 1,500 people below what the Navy said it needed just to maintain current strength, not to grow, not to expand, just to replace the people leaving and dying and retiring. Between April and July 2023, only 372 individuals joined the Royal Navy, a 4-month intake of 372 people for an entire naval service. As of April 2025, the UK Armed Forces stood at approximately 147,300 personnel, about 8,590 short of combined train strength targets, a deficit of 6% across all services. The Royal Navy specifically was running 8% below its train strength target. The Army was 3% below. The RAF was 13% below. But the Navy's deficit is particularly acute because naval specialist roles require years of training and experience to fill. You can't conjure a submarine engineer in 6 months. You can't train a nuclear reactor operator with a YouTube course. You can't create a sonar specialist through a weekend seminar. These are roles requiring years of technical education, followed by years of operational experience to reach full proficiency. The pipeline that produces them has been running below capacity for 14 years. Between mid-2022 and mid-2023, the Royal Navy experienced a net drop of 1,600 personnel, 4% of its entire force evaporating in 12 months. 1 year. During a period when Russia was invading Ukraine, China was expanding its fleet, and the need for capable naval power was becoming more obvious by the month. By October 2025, train strength had fallen to approximately 27,820 personnel. The January 2025 figures showed combined full-time trained strength for the Royal Navy, Royal Marines and RAF at 127,040, down 3,620 from January 2024. By April 2025, full-time trained strength fell further to 126,610, down 3,160 personnel, 2% from April 2024. More than 60% of departures are voluntary. People aren't dying out of the service. They aren't being injured and medically discharged. They aren't reaching mandatory retirement ages. They're choosing to leave. Family pressures drive some out. Better paid civilian opportunities pull others. Dissatisfaction with military life pushes the rest. The Navy trains them, invests in them, qualifies them, and then watches them walk out the door to work for civilian contractors who pay more and demand less. In 2023, all 3 services saw a 6% increase in leavers, with 1,000 more people departing than expected across the armed forces. 3 critical specialization areas face acute shortages: cyber specialists, engineers, and medical staff. The Navy needs people who understand computer networks and electronic warfare. The Navy needs people who can maintain complex propulsion systems and repair intricate weapon systems. The Navy needs doctors and medics who can provide care at sea. All 3 categories are running critically short. Many Royal Navy specialist roles require years of training and experience to fill, meaning shortages in these categories create disproportionate operational constraints. You can't just move a cook into a radar operator position when the radar operators leave. This isn't an abstract workforce statistic that only affects spreadsheets. It has direct operational consequences that show up in what ships can and can't do. Ships are going to sea without their full complement of crew. Defence analysts with access to operational reports have documented this pattern. Vessels are sailing undermanned because there simply aren't enough trained sailors to fill every billet on every ship that needs to deploy. Frigates have been scrapped and landing platform docks have been laid up specifically due to crew shortages. Not because the hulls were beyond repair, not because the mission had changed, not because someone decided the capability was unnecessary, because there was no one to sail them. As of July 2023, the Navy faced a deficit of approximately 500 trained personnel, equivalent to nearly 3 ship companies' worth of people. 3 ships' worth of crews that don't exist. Training pipelines have contracted as fewer recruits enter the system. Fewer recruits means fewer people completing training. Fewer people completing training means smaller cohorts reaching operational units. Smaller cohorts reaching operational units means longer waits to fill vacancies. Longer waits mean more strain on the people who remain, which means more departures, which means smaller training pipelines. The cycle feeds itself. There was some improvement recently. Between April 2024 and March 2025, 13,450 people joined the UK regular armed forces total, an increase of 2,150 recruits or 19% compared to the previous 12 months. Fewer personnel are leaving. 14,590 departed in 2024 to 25, which is 1,140 fewer than the preceding year, a 7% improvement in retention. But this modest uptick follows 14 years of failure. Train strength is still declining because departures still exceed arrivals even with the improvement. The hole got slightly less deep last year. The hole is still there. You can build as many frigates as you want. If there's no one to crew them, they stay tied to the dock. The specific ships with specific problems deserve naming because vague claims about maintenance can be dismissed while documented incidents can't. HMS Prince of Wales, Queen Elizabeth class aircraft carrier, pennant number R09. Commissioned 2019, broke down in August 2022 one day after sailing for the United States due to a misaligned propeller shaft. Suffered significant damage. Has faced significant scrutiny for its limited operational history. Currently serves as the fleet flagship as of late 2024. HMS Queen Elizabeth, lead ship of the Queen Elizabeth class. Pennant number R08. Commissioned 2017. Forced to cancel sailing in February 2024 after propeller shaft coupling issue discovered during pre-sailing checks. Didn't participate in planned NATO exercise. Completed first phase of planned maintenance, taking approximately 9 months by July 2024. Entered second phase of maintenance program by September 2024. HMS Dragon, Type 45 destroyer, pennant number D35. On March 2nd, 2026, drones attacked a British airbase in Cyprus. The Royal Navy was unable to immediately deploy HMS Dragon for response. The ship finally sailed on March 10th, 2026, 8 days after the attack. Days after an 11-ship French fleet had already deployed. While the Marine Nationale was on station defending NATO interests, Britain's advanced air defence destroyer was still getting ready to leave port. The Type 45 destroyers as a class have been called the world's most problematic destroyers by Military Watch magazine. Their availability rates have been notoriously poor, at times as low as 17%. 17% availability means for every 100 days, a Type 45 destroyer can sail for 17 of them. The root problem was the WR-21 gas turbine, which developed issues in warm water conditions, exactly where the Royal Navy needed to deploy these ships for operations in the Gulf and Mediterranean. The Type 45 destroyers entered service without a full shore-based test rig for their power generation and propulsion system. The problems manifested at sea instead of on land, where they could have been caught and fixed before ships were delivered. 3 of the 6 Type 45s have completed the power improvement project to address these propulsion problems. Half of Britain's destroyer fleet now has the power issue fixed. Work on all Type 45 destroyers is scheduled to be completed by 2028. 17 years after the first Type 45 entered service in 2009, the class might finally become reliable. After a decade of pain, defence publications now cautiously suggest they are finally getting reliable. That's the standard Britain accepts for its most advanced air defence platforms. In December 2024, 2/3 of the entire Royal Navy fleet was stuck in maintenance, unable to deploy. Not in reserve, not training, physically incapable of going to sea. As of early 2026, of approximately 13 destroyers and frigates in the fleet, only around 4 were at sea. 4 surface combatants operationally deployed out of 13 nominally available. Of 5 attack submarines, only 1 was known to be operational. Of the warships officially in service, only about a dozen are active, with many others in long-term maintenance. The Royal Navy has 63 commissioned ships on paper. It has about a dozen that can actually sail. One paragraph about money, because the commenters who care about budget context deserve an honest answer without it becoming a political lecture. Real terms defence spending fell by 22% between 2009 to 10 and 2016 to 17. UK overall defence spending dropped from £54.5 billion in 2010 to 2011 to £46.7 billion in 2016 to 2017 during austerity. It has since recovered somewhat to £56.8 billion in 2023 to 2024 and £63.6 billion in 2024 to 2025. The Institute for Fiscal Studies has documented that while defence spending declined as a share of GDP over decades, health spending rose. The National Audit Office found that the Ministry of Defence's equipment plan for 2023 to 2033 is unaffordable and facing the largest budget deficit since it was first made publicly available. Forecast costs exceed the budget by £16.9 billion. The Royal Navy specifically faces a £16.4 billion forecast cost increase, 41% higher than planned. The equipment plan includes around £40 billion for submarines, £24.8 billion for ships programmes over 10 years, and £71.5 billion for the nuclear enterprise, covering submarines and atomic weapons. The money isn't there. The ships aren't ready. The sailors aren't available. And the fleet is shrinking faster than anyone in government seems willing to admit publicly. The condition of the Royal Navy has been described as alarming, with almost every aspect of its capabilities under strength or overstretched. That's from Navy Lookout, a defence publication that tracks these things professionally. The current situation represents the most precarious phase of what analysts call managed decline. Conservative MP Benno Besekty stated publicly that the Royal Navy has effectively run out of ships. That's a sitting parliamentarian who receives classified briefings, saying on the record what the numbers clearly show. The The First Sea Lord and Chief of the Naval Staff has acknowledged that the Royal Navy won't be ready for an armed conflict until 2030. The professional head of the Naval Service, speaking about the service he leads, publicly admitted it can't fight until the end of the decade. None of this is misinformation. All of it's documented. All of it's officially published. All of it's parliamentarily recorded. All of it's verifiable by anyone willing to read primary sources instead of arguing in comment sections. So let's return to where we started. A video about Britain's Navy went viral. The comments weren't arguing about decline, they were arguing about accuracy. The original video got some things wrong. The admiral count was off by 1, which is functionally nothing when you're discussing institutional ratios. Treating normal carrier maintenance as evidence of crisis was sloppy and deserved criticism. The Falklands comparison appeared 6 times in the transcript and generated 0 comment engagement because, apparently, nobody cared. The critics caught errors. They were right to push back on sloppiness. Accuracy matters, especially when you're trying to document something as serious as the decline of a major naval power. But those critics made a mistake. They assumed that catching errors meant the underlying argument was wrong. They thought that pointing out where the original video was sloppy meant there was no problem to document. They used valid criticisms of presentation to dismiss valid concerns about substance. They were catastrophically wrong. The Royal Navy has 39 active flag officers at Rear Admiral and above, for a fleet of 15 major surface combatants. If you expand that to include attack submarines, it's still nearly 2 flag officers for every platform that can fight. It has failed to meet recruitment targets every year since 2011. It lost 1,600 personnel, 4% of its entire force, in a single year. Ships are sailing undermanned. Frigates have been scrapped because there's no one to crew them. Landing platform docks sit pierside for the same reason. The Type 26 frigate programme is 5 years behind schedule. The Type 31 programme has 0 ships in service. The frigate gap is real and deepening. By the end of 2025, only 7 frigates remained operational. Norway may receive British-built frigates before the Royal Navy does. HMS Prince of Wales broke down 1 day after sailing. HMS Queen Elizabeth cancelled deployment due to propeller problems 18 months later. HMS Dragon couldn't respond to an attack on a British base for 8 days while the French fleet was already on station. 2/3 of the fleet was stuck in maintenance in December 2024. Only 4 of 13 surface combatants were at sea in early 2026. Only 1 of 5 attack submarines was known to be operational. At the end of World War II, the Royal Navy was one of the largest in the world, with approximately 1,400 ships at its historical peak. Now it has 63, of which about a dozen can actually sail. The original video got details wrong. It deserved to be called out. But the people in those comments who said there's no problem, they're wrong too. The numbers prove it. British politicians should be awarded Iron Crosses for defeating the entire British Navy without firing a shot. That commenter had 4 likes. He should have had more. Subscribe for more stories like this one.